On October 1st, Iran launched a large-scale ballistic missile attack on Israel to retaliate against a series of actions by Israel in Iran, Lebanon and Palestine. Israel then said it would respond to Iran's military actions recently. The United States has also said that the United States and Israel are in communication about Israel's action plan to retaliate against Iran. On the 14th local time, the U.S. advance team arrived in Israel with the THAAD components. On the same day, senior Israeli officials said that they had reached an agreement on important contents of the plan to retaliate against Iran. Iran warned Israel not to retaliate and at the same time made contacts with multiple parties. Is Israel's retaliatory action imminent? After Israel implements retaliatory actions, how will Iran respond? Will it lead to a greater war crisis in the Middle East? As the Iran-Israel conflict spirals up, when will the cycle of violence end? A year after the outbreak of the new round of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the situation in the Middle East has become increasingly complex. The fire in Gaza has not stopped. Israel has launched military operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the confrontation with Iran has also heated up sharply. Iran fired a large number of ballistic missiles at Israel on October 1st, hitting Israeli military and security targets in response to a series of previous attacks and assassinations by Israel. The Israeli side said that Iran's move crossed the red line and made a big mistake, and said that Iran would be made to pay the price. Israeli Defense Minister Gallant said on October 9th that Israel will launch a retaliatory strike against Iran in a deadly, precise and surprising way. On the same day, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu talked with U.S. President Biden and discussed Israel's retaliation plan against Iran. But U.S. President Biden said that he does not support Israel's retaliatory strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. On the evening of the 10th, the Israeli Security Cabinet held a meeting to discuss Israel's plan to attack Iran. According to Israeli media reports, since Israel and the United States are still coordinating, the meeting did not make a major decision. U.S. media reports said that Israel has narrowed the scope of strikes to Iran's military and energy infrastructure. The Iranian side is also taking active actions. Iranian Foreign Minister Ara Ghkai has successively visited Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and other countries since the 4th. In Syria and Lebanon, Ara Ghkai said that Iran will fully support the forces that resist Israel. Ara Ghkai also said on the 8th that Iran is ready to deal with all situations and has marked all necessary strike targets. If there is an attack on Iran, Iran's response will be more powerful. On the 15th local time, the U.S. Department of Defense issued a statement saying that a U.S. advance team carrying the initial components of the THAAD anti-missile system had arrived in Israel on the 14th. It is expected that this type of missile defense system will be fully put into use soon. In the next few days, more U.S. military personnel and the THAAD components are expected to arrive. It is expected that, in the near future, the anti-missile system will be fully put into use in Israel. As we all know, this is a warning from the United States to Iran on the same day. News from the Israeli side shows that the Israeli Prime Minister, the Israeli Defense Minister and other key government officials have reached full agreement on many important contents of the plan to retaliate against Iran. But specific actions still need the final approval of the cabinet to be implemented. According to news disclosed by U.S. officials familiar with the matter, retaliatory actions will be carried out before the U.S. general election on November 5th. In addition, U.S. media reports also show that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu recently informed U.S. President Biden in a call to THAAD Israel plans to launch strikes on Iranian military facilities rather than oil facilities or nuclear facilities. This statement implies that Israel will launch a limited retaliatory action against Iran to avoid triggering an all-out war in response. The Iranian side said that any attack or aggression by Israel against Iran will be regarded as an act of war. and Iran will respond strongly. Jabari, an advisor to the commander of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, also warned on the 15th that the United States should not take any stupid actions against Iran. U.S. ships, military bases, etc., are all within the range of Iranian weapons. In addition, in response to the news that the United States provides the THAAD anti-missile system to Israel, Iranian media said that Iran has the ability to deal with the THAAD system. Reports said that Iran's Castle breaker-to-missile can fly at an altitude of less than 35 kilometers. This altitude is lower than the minimum detection altitude of the THAAD system, which enables the missile to effectively bypass the THAAD and hit the intended target. Therefore, an escalation of the regional situation may be difficult to avoid at present. The Israeli army is fighting on 7 fronts against the regional anti-Israeli alliance axis of resistance led by Iran. That is, simultaneously dealing with military threats from Gaza, the West Bank, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi forces in Yemen, Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq, and Iran itself. Some analysts believe that Israel hopes to seek absolute security by relying on its strength advantage, weaken or even defeat its opponents to the greatest extent through taking the initiative, expand its vested interests, establish a buffer zone, and achieve the goal of ending war with war. Some media pointed out that Iran and Israel have been competing in the Middle East for many years. Since this year, the relationship between the two sides has been continuously tense. Under the current circumstances, how Israel retaliates against Iran depends on the progress of Israel's military operations in Lebanon on the one hand, and on the coordination between Israel and the United States on the other hand. Other analyses believe that Iran is actually unwilling to expand the conflict. Iranian Foreign Minister Ara Ghakai has repeatedly said that Iran's goal is to promote a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon and end Israel's aggression. To this end, Iran is seeking support from multiple parties. On October 11th, Iranian President Pezeshkian held talks with Russian President Putin, and the two sides agreed to strengthen bilateral cooperation. But the current situation is that the confrontation between Iran and Israel is becoming more intense. The conflict between Lebanon and Israel is showing an expanding trend, and the United States is unable to control the regional situation. The mediation efforts of the international community are even less effective. After this attack, the hardline voices in Israel are more prominent, while people in Iran and some other Middle Eastern countries took to the streets to celebrate. This shows that after nearly a year of a new round of regional conflicts, the antagonism between regional countries has reached a new level. In the future, the peace talks and reconciliation process of all parties will face greater challenges. Tastian, a political analyst at the American University in Beirut, Lebanon, said that the United States providing the aid to Israel shows that the United States is deeply involved in the Middle East conflict and will bring risks to itself. Marwan Bishara, a senior analyst at Qatar's Al Jazeera, pointed out that the deployment of the THAAD anti-missile system by the United States to Israel will undoubtedly exacerbate regional tensions regarding Israel's retaliatory options. Orna Mizrahi, a senior researcher at the Israel National Security Institute and former deputy to the National Security Advisor, believes that Israel will not easily take action against Iran's nuclear facilities or oil facilities. Uzi Rabi, a researcher at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies at Tel Aviv University, believes that Israel will narrowly define the targets of attack as symbolic military targets such as the headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Strikes on such targets will not trigger large-scale international intervention. Ding Long, a professor at the Institute of Middle Eastern Studies at Shanghai International Studies University, said that Iran's bottom line is that its nuclear facilities and oil facilities are not attacked, and has conveyed this message to the Israeli side through European countries. if Israel does not touch the red line drawn by Iran. This round of the cycle of violence between Iran and Israel may end. Otherwise it will continue, however. Harrison Mann, a former analyst at the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, believes that once the THAAD system provided by the United States is deployed in place, Israel will strike Iran's sensitive targets without scruple. The Washington Post report quoted Aaron Miller, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a former advisor on the Palestinian-Israeli issue at the U.S. State Department, as saying that the deployment of the THAAD indicates that the United States judges that Israel's retaliation against Iran will be large-scale enough to force Iran to fight back. In response to Israel's retaliatory strikes, Saeed Reza Sadr Hosseini, a senior expert on West Asian issues in Iran, said that Iran has strengthened air defenses in important, key and basic regions. If Israel takes any action, given the necessary proportion, Iran will definitely deal a heavier blow to Israel. As tensions between Iran and Israel continue to rise, the world is beginning to pay attention to the possibility of an all-out war breaking out in the Middle East. According to reference news reports, Israeli Defense Minister Gallant threatened after Iran's attack on Israel that Israel will respond precisely and unexpectedly. Israeli reports have pointed out that the country's government has been planning an attack on Iran for the past 20 years and has also marked many attack targets in order to be able to strike first, especially to independently strike Iran without U.S. support. Although the Israeli government has been secretive, there are still traces of this project that cost billions of dollars. Multiple weapons have been specially designed for the characteristics of Iran to prepare for the ultimate battle to strike Iran. The Israeli Prime Minister once said that the Israeli government has locked in the target of striking Iran and will launch an attack before the U.S. general election. An article published by the Israeli Prime Minister's office in the U.S. media on the 15th said that Israel will listen to the opinions of the United States, but will decide its actions based on its own national interests. However, Netanyahu told Biden in a call on the 8th that Israel's retaliation will not include attacks on oil fields and nuclear facilities, and will launch an attack before the U.S. general election November 5, aiming to avoid political interference in the U.S. election during a critical period. But Iran's strength should not be underestimated. Some analysts believe that compared with neighboring countries such as Lebanon, Iran is relatively far from Israel, even taking the fastest air route. The flight distance is more than 1,700 kilometers. Iran's mountainous terrain is convenient for hiding targets. Iran's nuclear facilities and ballistic missiles are buried deep underground, increasing the difficulty of destruction. In addition, Iran's own military industry and scientific research strength is also very strong. For example, the country's researchers have transformed the early Scud missile into the domestic THAAD missile, and its performance is also very excellent, according to reports. Iran is said to have a domestic air defense system that has never been put into actual combat. There is still great mystery as to what obstacles Israel's attack will encounter. Iranian media claims that this system can be comparable to the Russian S-300 air defense missile system, and the latter is capable of intercepting Israeli missiles.